Welcome back to another episode of the Manadrake Podcast. I'm your host, Logan, and with me today is Christian. Christian, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty okay. It's looking a little cloudy in here. How have you been over this past week?
Pretty good.
Yeah, been busy?
Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Life and work has been kind of getting a little hectic, but we're here. We made it. It's Tuesday. And record another episode for y'all. Today we got a pretty common topic, I would say, but today we're going to be talking about Stax, and not like no, you shouldn't play them, or no, you're a bad player if you play Stax, but more so like what we think on it and kind of just some ideas on the topic. And I mean, one thing from the get I want to kind of talk about is I personally see Stax as like a puzzle game. That's how I would recommend other people going into it, because it makes it honestly makes the playing experience a lot better. Personally, I've found when you think of it as a mini game, and it makes it to where I think that you play better because you're actively thinking of ways to solve it instead of just.
And if you're playing in a pod at the level where people are playing Stax, which should be like the higher end of Commander, you should be running a lot of interaction at that like level of play, and Stax really punishes the people that try and avoid like tuning their deck with interaction.
No, 100%. There's definitely ways that you can stop Stax from getting to the point where it's dragging on a game and you're not able to do anything. But like Christian said, I mean, you should be running like 10 to 15 pieces of interaction or something to either help your game plan or prevent someone else's game plan. And I think that's kind of how we just wanted to start it with, was just preface that don't hate on your friends or people that you meet in pods that are playing Stax. We all have our certain ways that we like to play, and I think that, like, think of it like another mini game. It makes it go a lot smoother.
Right. Like at the end of the day, they are cards in the game that we all play.
Yeah.
Like
it's cardboard. You can reach over and rip it up. You never. No, do not do that. But yeah, like Christian's saying, at the end of the day, it's a game that we all like to play.
Yeah. And that's just part of it.
Yep. 100%. So we're going to kick off. We just got some questions that we're going to chit chat about today. And if you guys want to add your comments and tell us what you guys think too, be sure to drop it down low. First one we're going to kind of talk about is what Christian and I play Stax wise, I guess you could say, or what we run along the lines of that. Christian, if you want to go first, I've kind of been dominating the mic right now.
Yeah, no, all good. So I don't run a whole lot of Stax. I run a few in a couple decks here and there. So for instance, in my one CDH deck, I have Ashaya. I have a couple cards like Manglehorn, which is 2 and a green for a creature. I honestly forgot the power and toughness. I believe it's at 2/2.
I think so too.
And when it ETBs, you get to destroy target artifact, and then it also makes your opponent's artifacts come into play tapped, which can really slow them down.
Yeah.
Pretty efficient for what it does.
Yeah, I never used to run it only because I thought it would negatively affect me or make me a target.
Right.
But it really slows down token synergies, especially with all the treasure printing that's been going on.
Yeah, the treasures, and also the way that CDH has become, where like a quarter of your deck is mana artifacts.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I know you run Collector Oof.
Yep, I run Collector Oof in a couple decks. That's another big one. You'll notice that trend, a lot of the stuff I run is hate towards artifacts.
Yep.
But yeah, Collector Oof is null red on a creature.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It really does just shut some people's game plans down.
Yep.
Some of the stuff I run in Urza. I typically run some pretty hated Stax pieces. Mainly the one-sided Stax pieces like Winter Orb and Stasis Orb. and then running a Karn Mycosynthellatus combo. Just ways to really deny my opponents doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Some people sigh when they see it, but there is moments of interaction where people can do something if they kind of gang up on me, I guess you could say.
Right.
It is hard to play through because it is mono blue, and I play a ton of interaction to stop people from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
But there's definitely ways around it. And then in Zur, I don't really play any stacks. I mean, I play removal enchantments, which to me means
that's spot removal.
Yeah.
That's not stacks, in my opinion.
I guess, yeah, that would make more sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't really run any stacks in Zur, which some people do. Some people run a stacks Zur, and it's really good because you just play Rule of Law for free.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where we stand.
Yeah. And one more card I wanted to touch on too is in my Simic landfall deck, I run Tatiova extra turns. I have Collect Roof in there, but another one that I think should pretty much go into any deck that has blue in it is Narset Parter of Veils.
Oh.
It's just insanely good, being able to stop your opponents from gaining card advantage, which is one of the strongest things to do in Magic. And also on the flip side, it gives you card advantage. You get to look at the top 4 and reveal a non-creature, non-land card and put it into your hand.
Yeah.
So like just being able to filter through your stuff and then deny your opponent's card draw is really strong. And there's also instances where you can have her out alongside a like a Windfall or a Wheel of Fortune or something, and just wipe your opponent's hands while you get to refill.
And I appreciate you mentioning that because it is a card that I run, but obviously it's pretty forgetful sometimes.
Yeah.
But another card I remembered is Aven Mind Sensor. I mean, that's a form of stacks. Anything that really prevents your opponents from doing anything. I mean, people could consider Telepathy, which is a 1-drop blue enchantment, which reveals everyone else's hands besides your own.
Yep.
Which could be considered stacks because it dramatically slows down the game.
Yeah.
Because
you see a player with a counter spell, no one's going to play stuff.
Yep. You see everything that's going on, but you're the only person that has their hand still hidden, and it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want to lead us into our next topic.
Yeah, so we just went over some of the stuff we run, and then we kind of also want to go over a general idea of like what kind of stacks you can see from each color in Magic. And do we want to just go down a list of the colors and
we can kind of
name a couple cards?
Yeah. I mean, we could start off with white. They are probably the best color for stacks generally. Because there's not a lot of speed, I guess you could say. There's not a ton of ramp in white, so they really like slowing down the game to their pace.
Yeah.
Like catch-up effects like land tax. There's the Deep Gnome Terramancer that they just printed.
Yep.
Those are the catch-up effects that I'm talking about. But the stacks pieces you have are like Rule of Law.
Rule of Law is the biggest one.
Yep. And there are multiple Rule of Law effects in white that aren't enchantments, which makes it really good.
There's the, what's her name? Eidolon of...
Rhetoric,
yep.
Which I think is a 4-drop or a 3-drop. She costs a little bit more because she has a pretty decent body. Yeah, and then you have like Sphere of Resistance, Sphere of Safety. Sphere of Resistance is a artifact. Do you have Eidolon of Rhetoric up?
Yeah, Eidolon of Rhetoric is 2 and a white for a 1/4 enchantment creature spirit, and each player can't cast more than one spell each turn.
Which it's really good.
Yeah.
I've seen it abused in Azorius blink decks where people blink it and they cast some instant speed stuff, and then it comes back in off of the blink, which is just really good value.
And then there's a few other cards that do similar things, like Archon of Emeria is
Yep.
very similar as well.
Another great card that was printed in not too good of a set for Commander personally, I think, is Drannith Magistrate. Totally hoses decks.
Yeah.
Especially graveyard synergies or people who are trying to play off the top of their library. It's super good. And you can't play your commander.
Yeah.
So
It also stops like impulse draw, which shuts down the red decks. And
yep. It just does so much for only 2 mana. And I'll read it off for you. It's 1 and 1 white. Creature, human, wizard. Your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. And it's a 1/3. Just super good. Yeah. I think whenever the table sees one of these come down, it's kind of a group effort deciding on how it's going to. You kind of look around and you kind of side eye people, and you're like, "Who's going to get affected by this the most, and are they going to take care of it?"
Yeah. And the biggest thing about this card as well is it's one-sided, so like there's no reason not to run it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was just thinking of some other stuff. Like Ghostly Prison effects.
Yep.
Which is pretty general. It's 2 and a white enchantment. Creatures can attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. And then on the same side of that, there's a card called Sphere of Safety, which is 4 and a white. So if you're in an enchantment-based strategy, this is really good. It reads, creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Super good.
Yeah.
My cousin Andrew plays a really good Sithis, green-white Selesnya.
Yep.
Really good Selesnya enchantments deck. Super quick because Sithis is really, really good, and Andrew knows how to build a good deck. And he gets this out, and you just can't attack him because it's like 10 for each creature. And at that point, he's pretty much closing out the game.
Yeah. You also got similar cards like Norn's Annex, where it's they have to pay Phyrexian white to be able to attack you. So
yeah.
1 white or 2 life, which can add up pretty quick.
Yep. I mean, even adding that, I mean, could you consider Norn a Stax piece?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, she just hoses low to the ground strategies.
Yeah, like Elf Ball. And
yep. Gosh, I hate playing against mono white Elish Norn.
Yep.
With my elves, it doesn't last very long.
Do we want to hop into the next color?
Yeah, we can. Do you want to? I mean, I know what I want to talk about, but
yeah, go for it.
I mean, one of the most notable Stax cards is probably Rhystic Study.
Yeah.
For blue. 2 and a blue enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. There's been multiple times where I want to get a tattoo on the top of my hand where I can just place my hand on the table whenever someone says, I'm casting this. I'm like, do you pay the 1?
Yeah, right.
Super good, especially if it goes unchecked. You always pay the 1. You always pay the 1. And if you can't, you pray that it just hit a land.
You know what I just realized?
What?
Pay the 1 with a question mark or whatever is exactly 8, so you can get like a knuckle tattoo.
Oh, we should do that. Oh yeah, I think I know what my Halloween or my Friday the 13th tattoo is going to be.
Oh yeah. So some of the other blue cards you could see coming up in Stax for blue is like I mentioned before, Narset Parter of Veils stops your opponents from drawing more than 1 card each turn. Another big one is Arcane Laboratory, which is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. So another rule of law effect in blue, which is really nice.
Yes. I've heard of that card, but I don't think I've ever seen it played against me.
Yeah, the first time I saw it was a couple of nights ago playing on Spell Table.
Gotcha. Another really big blue card is Stasis.
Yeah.
It's 1 and 1 blue. Players do not get an untap phase. Pay blue during your upkeep or stasis is destroyed.
Yep, and one of the biggest stasis decks at the moment right now is Yorn. He's the guy when he attacks, you untap all your snow permanents, so you have a way in the command zone to get around stasis effects.
Yeah, and coupling that with an artifact called Smokestack, it's super good. That kind of sums it up for blue.
Yeah,
there's not a ton in blue.
Like there's also like Mana Breach and like what's the other one? It's like over something.
Mystic Remora you could count.
Yeah, that just falls under like the Ristic study category.
Yeah, but blue you have so much interaction with counterspells and bounce magic that it kind of makes up for itself not having effects that slow people down because your counterspells are slowing people down.
Yeah, and one of the ones I just mentioned, Mana Breach, is pretty nice. Whenever a player plays a spell, that player returns a land he or she controls to its owner's hand. Used to be really big with what's her name, Chulane, because you would always have a land in your hand to play off the
creature trigger.
Yep. But Chulane doesn't see much play anymore after the Flash ban.
Yeah. A friend of mine plays Chulane, but I don't think he plays Mana Breach.
It's really good.
I'll have to mention it to him.
Do we want to move on to black?
Oh, you know it. There's not really a ton in black. Well, there's a couple cards.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
But I feel like they're more along the lines of people sacrificing stuff or like your upkeep making people sacrifice stuff or lose life.
Yeah.
One of the cards I'm looking at is Opposition Agent. It doesn't necessarily tax somebody, but it definitely stops somebody from grabbing their win con at flash speed. Opposition Agent reads 2 and a black. Creature human rogue. Flash. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. And it's a 3/2.
Yep.
Which is really good.
Yeah, that's got me a couple times before. It's not fun to be on the other side from.
No, it's not.
A couple other Stax pieces that I personally like to play is Dothy Voidwalker.
I was just about to mention it. And
it's very good. I run that in my Grenzo Dungeon Warden list. Just being able to exile anything that goes to your opponent's graveyard, and then just one turn being like, oh, I like one of those cards. I want to cast it for free. There was one game where like we were at a huge disadvantage playing against a god tribal deck, and he like did the world tree thing where he got all of his gods into play.
Yeah.
And one guy was really far behind. He was playing a Boros deck, and he discarded down to hand size and put a Farewell in his graveyard. So I got exiled with a void counter on it. So I got to cast it for free with Dothy Voidwalker. And
that's some spicy.
Get rid of the gods.
Some spicy tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's rest in peace with more text, which is just better.
Yeah.
It really solves your graveyard problem if people are playing Reanimator. And
it's one-sided. Like,
exactly.
Again, not really a reason not to run it. Like
a big counter spell war goes out, you're getting all of those counter spells.
Yep. That's very relevant too.
Yep. And if you're playing stuff that copies creatures and stuff, like if you're playing rogue copy, I mean, you could have multiple Douthys out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Not saying you would, because one instance of it is good. Obviously, having multiples where you could play multiple cards from the void, I guess you could say, is really good. But overall, really good card.
Yeah. And another one, you don't see it a whole lot anymore, but it used to be backbreaking back in the day, is Contamination. It is 2 and a black enchantment. During your upkeep, sacrifice a creature or sacrifice Contamination. And it makes it so whenever a land is tapped for mana, it produces black instead of its normal type and amount. So...
yeah.
I think one of the big reasons it doesn't see play anymore is like everyone's playing talismans and signets or whatever. Like they're not reliant on their land base to get their mana.
The mana base has shifted so much to artifacts that
like what nowadays it's like rare to see a list that has more than 30 lands.
I run 28 in all three of my CEDH decks, 28 to 30 depending.
Yep.
But that's just because I'm supplementing with 18 mana artifacts.
Yeah. Or like my CDH list where it's Elf Ball, like all of my creatures tap for mana.
Exactly.
And my commander makes all my creatures lands, so like I run less than 30 lands in there.
I think both of our Elf Ball decks have one with only one land out. Like,
it's so
it
easy.
Easily happens, and that's winning by turn 4 or 5. Like, it's not a slow one land thing. It's still competitive.
Right. There's been games where I win with one land where it's like, okay, so I have a Leyline of Abundance, my opener, put that down, turn 1 Birds of Paradise. That's 3 mana on turn 2 to play with, still with only one land out. It just kind of snowballs from there. Yeah,
it really gets going. I was just thinking Cormus Bell with Toxrill is a really backbreaking combo.
Yeah.
Toxrill himself can be considered a Stax piece because he's putting neg1 counters on all your things. Mm-hmm. And it gets around... what mechanic does it get around? There's a specific mechanic where it's... counters can't be placed on anything, or neg1 counters can't be placed on anything, but it's not a neg1 counter.
It's a slime counter, and then he has a static ability where all creatures have -1/-1 equal to the number of slime counters on them.
Yeah.
And the fun thing about that combo with Cormus Bell that animates all swamps or whatever, you also need Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth with that combo. Urborg doesn't have a mana pip on it, so it can go in any deck. It doesn't have to be a black deck, so you can even do that in Elishnorn. And it's
super nutty. So I guess you could say that if you have the combo right, it can be considered its own Stax piece. I've had it happen to me, and it was brutal.
Oh yeah,
and it really shut me down, and I was like, okay, I don't want to play anymore. Another card I was thinking of is Painful Quandary.
Yep.
You don't see it a lot anymore, especially in CEDH scenes.
There's no way you see it in there, but like the higher power, like Nath of the Guilt Leaf, you see that a lot in there, or any like discard tribal stuff, Tiny Bones.
So it's 3 and 2 black enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life on us, unless he or she discards a card. I could see this also being really good in Terragard lists.
Yep.
Because you're either dealing damage to them,
or gaining control of one
of their things. So all in all, really good. You could also play it in the new Braids style deck too. So definitely some juicy stuff in black. More so stacks that gets you immediate advantage. So that you can use it like the Douthie and some other stuff like Opposition Agent.
Yep. Do we want to move on to red?
Yeah, because red has some cards that I really hate. Like love, but hate.
Love playing, hate seeing it on the other side.
I mean, I'll kick it off with probably one of the biggest ones is Blood Moon.
Yep, Blood Moon.
It's 2 and a red. All non-basic lands are mountains. This hoses a lot of CGH decks, if not like 70 to 80%, I would say, in my personal playing and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm not a stat person. I don't know what the technical term is for that. But I just the other night I saw it turn one person's all their lands off in their entire deck.
A lot of people, especially in like the higher end of play, they get really greedy with their mana base and maybe run only like one basic of each color. So
well, and this was being played again. So there was a Blood Moon out and there was a Yasharn Stax. So artifacts couldn't be tapped for their abilities, and a Blood Moon was out. So his entire deck was shut off. And then he played a Drannith Magistrate after I played a Drannith Magistrate.
Oh, so everyone was locked.
Oh yeah, dude. I won through I played I got an infinite combo off through the Stax with it was Zur. I was playing Zur and got an infinite combo. I didn't win right away either. Dramatic Versal Isochron Scepter. I used a Tainted Pact to tutor for a Soul Ring. And then casted the Soul Ring and generated infinite colorless black, blue, white. But they were the talismans, so I had to watch how much life I had. So I only used it for specific things. And I didn't win that turn, and it actually went on to like 2 turns go around. They got rid of the Isochron Scepter, but didn't get rid of my 4 mana artifacts. But if they had gotten rid of one of my mana artifacts, I wouldn't have been able to do Scepter.
Right.
And this is all at a Stax table where I memory lapsed a Collector Oof, and he put it back on top and then never casted it again. And then laid Thassa's Demonic Consultation, and the other blue player didn't have a counterspell, surprisingly. It was super, super weird, but I was like, cool. I mean, you got to get it when you can.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry for the tangent. It was just Blood Moon sparked a memory in my mind. I was like, oh, yeah, this happened the other day.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot in red. You got other stuff like Harsh Mentor. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield that isn't a mana ability, Harsh Mentor deals 2 damage to that player. So that's, again, stops like Isochron combo and a bunch of other stuff like that.
There's the land guy where if you tap a land, you take 2 damage. Or whenever you lay a land, you take 2 damage.
Zozu the Punisher.
Yep.
There's also stuff you don't see too often, like Price of Glory. It's a enchantment in red. Whenever a player taps a land for mana during another player's turn, destroy that land.
It stops other people playing on other people's turns.
For the most part, yeah.
Some people are ready to lose some lands if they got to stop a win. But another good card is Smoke.
Smoke's pretty good.
That's actually a card that I just discovered recently. Smoke is 2 red enchantment. No player may untap more than 1 creature during his or her untap phase. So it's another stasis essentially.
Yep.
Or not stasis, but it's another stasis-like effect that doesn't let you untap things.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of really it for red.
Do we want to move on to green?
Yeah, because I think green has
a lot of fun stuff.
Green has some fun stuff. And then we'll kind of talk about some mixed color stuff and some artifacts. We'll kind of just mix those together because multicolor and artifacts kind of go hand in hand because you're playing both of them interchangeably.
Right.
You want to start us off in green?
Yeah, so big one we already talked about is called Collector Oof. It is 1 in green for a 2/2 creature Oof. Oof. And it says activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. And this just shuts down every artifact with no stipulation. Most of the things that stop stuff like this, like ignore it if it's like most of the other cards that like stop people from using artifacts let them tap for mana abilities still, but this just shuts down everything. Yeah,
it's like we had mentioned, Null Rod effects. Null Rod is it's an artifact that does the same thing. Yeah, I've been hosed by this card multiple times playing Urza.
Yep.
And sometimes there's just no way to get around it. There was one time I played a Mycosynth Lattice into it to purposely shut everybody else off because I was pissed. And then I managed to bounce the oof and go infinite on my next turn.
There you go.
Yeah, I drew into it. I wasn't planning it. It just happened. Yeah, there's Collector Oof. You kind of have the hate bears.
Yeah, green
which
and white are the big colors for hate bearers.
I can't think of the best one off the top of my head. It's on the tip of my tongue, but not the top of my head. Why am I drawing a blank? It's always when we're recording, guys.
Yep.
It's always when we sit down and we're like, you want to talk about Magic?
Yeah. I mean, we did talk about Manglehorn.
Yep.
So, yeah, again, 2 and a green for a creature when it ETBs destroy an artifact, and then artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Another one similar to that is really nice. It's called Root Maze. It is 1 green for an enchantment. Artifacts and lands come into play tapped.
Yeah,
it's not one-sided, but like just being able to stop people from going land, mana crypt, mana vault, soul ring, commander.
Root Maze is really good. I think it's considered one of the top Stax pieces just to slow people down.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to play in green, 4 stacks, which slows you're pretty we can kind of lean into the multicolor because we're kind of leaning into green and stuff like that. Gaddock Teague.
Yeah,
it's
that's a big one.
Green and white, legendary creature, Kithkin Advisor. Non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be cast. That's a state-based action, so it just can't happen. And then non-creature spells with X in their mana cost can't be cast. It stops quite a bit of commanders, because I think the average CMC for commanders right now is floating at right about 4, especially
3 to 4.
For CEDH commanders. I think that's where you get your real big value from. Because let's face it, your 3 to 4 CMC slot in your deck has pretty much your most powerful cards for the price. We're not playing like Biorhythm because I don't know why it's banned. Just unban Biorhythm, man. Like they unbanned Worldfire, but they won't unban Biorhythm. Like,
yeah. Another multicolor stacks piece that I'm really into, but I don't see a lot, is Lavinia Azorius Renegade. It is 1 and a blue for it is 1 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. And then whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So if you're trying to accelerate your mana with like mana rocks and stuff and then go into a non-creature spell, you can't with Lavinia. Or if you try to cast a Force of Will, a Pact of Negation, any of the free counter spells or any free spells in general, she counters that on a 2-mana creature. It's pretty damn good.
Yeah, she's pretty busted. I hate seeing her out super early because it really does just shut down some like 5 or 6 cards in each of my decks that are pretty vital to the game plan. Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can say about Lavinia. She says it all on the card. I mean, your free counter spells can't do anything.
And another big thing is it also shuts down Cascade decks because those are cast for free.
It shuts down Urza because I had played it wrong for a while because Urza's text box says play or says play but not cast. So me being me, I thought it got around the cast trigger on Lavinia.
No.
But no, play is cast. Yep. It's so that you can play lands.
Yeah, cast is playing a spell and then play includes lands.
Yep. But that's really the only ruling difference. But if it says put into play, then obviously it just gets around it.
Yep.
That's how Zura's red is. It just boop, just put it down. I know there's another really good card for Azorius. Like a really good Stax card. Do you want to tell me what it is?
It is... I never know how to pronounce him, but it's Grand Arbiter Augustus.
Like, Augustine. We'll call him.
And also I'm bad with my Roman numerals. Is that a 4?
Let me see it. That is the 4 because they're weird. It's 4.
It's 4. Okay. Grand Arbiter Augustin the Fourth is 2 white and blue for a 2/3 legendary creature human advisor, and he says white spells you play cost 1 less to play, blue spells you play cost 1 less to play, and spells your opponents play cost 1 more to play. So not only is it accelerating you, but it's also shutting down your opponents. And the neat thing is the cost reducing abilities on him for yourself are on separate lines of text. So if you have a spell that's both white and blue, it is reduced by 2.
Yep. I had a deck of him for like 2 or 3 weeks. I managed to pick up an OG foil. I was like, let's just build them for fun. It wasn't very fun for me.
Quote unquote fun.
Yeah. And it wasn't fun for people I played against either.
Yeah, I know the first time I played against it with you, you were getting pretty frustrated because anytime you tried to cast him, I would counter it. And like,
but then once he landed, it was like games just.
We have enough like a mana on board where his ability wasn't relevant.
Yeah, no. And in a CEDH format, I think that he's really good because you have the ability to accelerate things out. Mm-hmm. Like you have the ability to accelerate him out on turn 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the level I built him at, he was coming out on like turn 6 if I was lucky.
Do you want to go over some colorless cards now?
Yeah, because I think colorless has the majority of the Stax pieces.
The good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff that just punches you right in the gut and then says, don't get back up. Yeah, one we talked about earlier was Smokestack.
Yep.
It's 4 colorless artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a soot counter on Smokestack. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a permanent for each soot counter on Smokestack. So you can arrange the triggers because they happen at the same time, where you're always sacking less than your opponents.
Yep.
This is really, really good in Terra Grid because you just sack all of their stuff that they're sacrificing again.
Yep.
So
it's easier to snowball into it.
I played it once or twice and people hated me, and that's when I tore my Terra Grid deck apart.
Another big one in colorless you'll see a lot is Winter Orb. It is I believe a 3 mana artifact. Is it only 2? All right.
It's really good.
Another one you'll see a lot is Winter Orb. It's a 2 mana artifact, and it says each player can only untap 1 land per turn.
Yeah, basically. Pretty much.
And then it's had the errata that a lot of artifacts from back in the day have had, where its effect is only active if it is untapped. So there's a lot of ways, like in Urza, where you can tap it in the end step prior to yours.
Yeah,
and
really good.
So you get to untap all your lands while everyone else does not.
Also, in a deck tech that we had done, Maria, Scholar of Antiquities.
Yep.
It's really good in there, especially because you're doing a creature-based strategy in that deck. So, I mean, if you're interested, go and check that episode out. We did a fully fleshed out deck for that one.
Yep.
Plays a really similar... You're playing Stax really heavy in that deck.
Yep.
To stop other people from accelerating past you. Another one, kind of like Winter Orb, I talked about it earlier with my Urza deck, is Static Orb.
Yep.
It's 3 colorless, and players can only untap 1 permanent per turn.
I thought it was 2.
It is 2. My apologies. Yep. I play the card and I know the card, but it's 2 permanents. So they have to choose between their lands or a creature if they want to block with something. Most of the time people pick 1 and 1. But then you have Winter Orb out, so people can only untap 1 land. It's really good.
Yep.
Also errated where it only works if it's untapped.
Yep. So another one very similar to the last 2 we just mentioned. This one doesn't see a whole lot of play compared to the others, but I still think it's really good, is Storage Matrix. It is a 3 mana artifact. As long as Storage Matrix is untapped, each player chooses artifact, creature, or land during his or her untap step, and that player can only untap permanents of the chosen type this step. So they have to choose if they want to attack or cast stuff or have some artifacts to have untapped.
Just like it has some artifacts to just fiddle with.
Yeah. So it basically like locks your opponent out of like one of their phases during their turns.
Yeah, and if someone is playing creature-based strategy, you can do, if you're playing in blue, there are multiple tap down effects. Works really good when you tap all their creatures down, and then you're like, okay, creatures don't untap.
Yep.
And you're like, they will not untap for the rest of the game.
Yeah. Well, that player gets to choose during their turn. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I see what you're saying.
It makes them choose.
Yeah.
If they were gonna have their creature, if they thought they were gonna have their creatures untapped, and they had developed.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. They had developed a game plan where they're like,
okay, next turn I'm gonna have my creatures untapped because I left them untapped, and now I can untap my lands. And you're just like, no. You got to choose now.
Yeah. Another really good. This is a creature, not an artifact, but it's colorless. It's a Wandering Archaic.
Ooh, yep.
A 5-drop. It has a flip side. I'm not too worried about the flip side because I never play it.
Yep.
Creature avatar. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, they may pay 2. If they don't, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy.
Yeah.
It's a 4/4.
This thing is brutal. Like, yeah, you get some advantage along the way, like someone casts a tutor or a ramp spell or whatever. But the biggest thing about this card is if you're trying to go for your win or whatever, and someone counters your spell and they're tapped out, you get to copy their counter spell to counter their counter spell.
And it happens in response to it because it triggers on their cast. So your ability gets layered on top, and then the copy gets layered on top. So
yours resolves. Your copy will always resolve before theirs,
which is really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's really slept on too. There's multiple instances where I've seen 2 or 3 at the table, and then all of a sudden no one gets to do anything because one counter spell comes out, and everybody gets a counter spell.
Yeah, like there was that one time you were playing Zur, I believe, and two of our friends had Wandering Archaics out, and I went to go red elemental blast your commander before your attack step, and you tried to counter mine, but I didn't pay for their Wandering Archaics, and Zur was the only blue permanent on the board, so their copies all targeted.
And then I didn't pay for my counters, so then they countered her. I was like, no. Why?
That was a good time.
Oh, dude. I got bullied for that for weeks. Yeah, some other really good cost increaser like Stax pieces in colorless are Thorn of Amethyst and Sphere of Resistance. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to play. Just super good. They're 2-drop artifacts. And 1 mana CEDH is a lot, especially because Curve is on 2 or 3, and you're winning by turn 4 typically. So delaying that 1 extra turn or 2 extra turns really breaks parity. And cool thing, Christian and I, when we went to Indianapolis, I got to talk to Chuck Lukex. Super cool guy. He did the artwork for Thorn of the Amethyst.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many colorless artifacts. But I know that we had some other topics that we kind of wanted to cover too. Do you want to bring up? Oh, whoa. Do you want to bring up one more colorless Stax piece and then?
But yeah, another artifact you'll see every once in a while is called Trinisphere. It is 3 mana for an artifact. As long as Trinisphere is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast costs 3 mana to cast. So if someone tries to cast, let's say, a Dark Ritual which usually costs 1 black, now it costs 1 black and 2 generic. And it just really stops like Storm players or just like, even if you can get this out on turn 1 with like a mana crypt or something, just your opponents have to wait until turn 3 to cast any spells because they can't cast their Soul Ring because that's 3 mana.
And is that a replacement effect? Does it change their CMC to 3?
No. It just, when you go to cast it, it just costs more. It does not change the CMC.
Because I was thinking with, Chalice of the Void, another really good Stax piece in CEDH.
Yep.
You can name 0 and it kills people's turn ones.
Oh yeah, Chalice on 0 is
super good. Chalice
good.
on 1 or 2. Chalice on 3 is devastating.
Yeah.
But Chalice on 2 is super good. It stops your passes and stuff.
I was going to say, if you ever play Chalice of the Void, the safest option is to always go on 2 because that's the CMC of both Tainted Pact, Demonic Consultation is 1, I bet. But it's Tainted Pact and Thassa's Oracle, so it really hinders those lines.
And Underworld Breach.
Yep.
Which those two combos are probably the most prolific combos in the format right now. And it stops the Drannith Magistrate from mucking up your plans.
Yep.
But we mentioned all these cards, but I mean, is there a way where you can take it too far and kind of accidentally lock yourself out of the game?
Yeah.
I know I've done it to myself once or twice with a Mycosynth Lattice and not realizing what was across the board from me. Because Mycosynth easily can just say, nope, you played me wrong, and now you're going to pay for it. I know when Hull Breacher was out, I had that Gilded Drake from me before.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
And that's not necessarily on my wrong doing half, but the possibility of it happening is super hurtful. Yeah, besides the Mycosynth, I've never locked myself that hard.
Yeah, there's been some like weird scenarios where like, oh, I can win with Staff of Domination right now, but I played a Collector Roof on turn 2, so like I got to find a way to get rid of that before I can win. There's been like instances of that, but I think the biggest way to like just kind of like not locking yourself is just to be, just pay attention to the board, not only to your side but also what your opponents are playing. And that's because I remember one time you played a Mycosynth Lattice while I had a Collector Roof out, and you're like, oh no, it's fine, but because you thought Urza would still get around that, but Mycosynth makes Urza artifact, and
I think I still managed to get around it.
Yeah,
I forget what I did, but
I think you just beat me down with your Constructs because it made all your lands,
it made all my lands huge
or whatever. So at some point I had to block with the Collector Roof,
and then at that point I just went,
Yep.
Hey, Constructs for the win, especially when it's like an 18-18.
Yeah. And your opponents can't cast any spells.
Exactly.
Well, no one can cast spells.
No one can. I think it was just us playing though.
Yeah, it was a 1v1.
Yeah, there's not a ton of instances like I had mentioned where I lock myself out. But going back to Christian mentioning that just paying attention, I think you should just take that wholeheartedly, and just paying attention in general while you're playing the game is important for everyone's time. I know I'm guilty of it sometimes, going on my phone, and it's a really bad habit that I need to break. But some people just totally disregard like what's going on. Like I know you had down in Indianapolis, the guy with the
coloring book.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. He was just being, I prefaced before we started playing, like, hey, I'm playing a Storm deck. Are you guys okay with that? And everyone was like, yeah, that's cool. Like, cause it's my Gruul Storm deck, which you don't see a lot. So most people are like kind of excited and want to see what it does. And I got to a point where I started popping off, and like I was probably 10, 15 minutes into my turn. I was getting close, and the guy to my right pulled out a coloring book and just started coloring or whatever. And I'm like, that's funny. Like that used to be the meme, like back in like Modern Storm or whatever. You would bring like a little coloring book for your opponent as a joke or whatever. But like he was just being super weird about it. And at the end of the game after I won, he's like, did you like my joke? And I'm like, yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. You might have been able to do something if you would have talked to the people and tried to do something. But and it might seem like we're off topic, but trying to bring it back around.
It's just pay attention.
paying attention and being
Like-
respectful to the other players, especially if they are playing stacks.
Yeah.
Is
And
it-
because like not only is it going to benefit you knowing what's going on the board, but it's also like, yeah, like you said, respectful to your opponents. Like you're taking up their time like with playing with them. So like, don't be rude. Just like be at the table.
Yeah. And you're there to have fun with them. I
Yeah.
mean, I like to think that the Magic community is really open about accepting people and coming to play, especially with new players. And this is kind of just a PSA, like, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
It makes the game not fun.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm trying to keep this related to stacks, but I mean, then again, we're just talking here. With the coloring book and stuff like that, it's beneficial for you to pay attention while stacks is happening, because if you are playing in a tournament setting and you muck up and you miss something that they told you about doing and you reveal information, I know you can't get disqualified or something like that,
Right.
if you, because most stacks pieces are state-based actions, which means like the game physically won't let
There's
you
no
cast
time.
it.
There's no
Exactly.
time in between.
Right. Like, so you physically can't do it. But you're releasing information that otherwise your players, they wouldn't know.
Right.
So you not paying attention to what's happening at the table affects your chances on winning a game, especially at CEDH level, where if someone knows you're about to lay a Gilded Drake, but you can't cast more than one spell each turn, and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to make sure I get my value out of this thing before you take it, or I'm going to kill it.
Yeah. And I know we have a guy that we play with every once in a while where it's like, granted, he doesn't know the game as well as like you and I do, but like we'll play something or whatever, and we're just talking at the table a few turns later or whatever, and you bring up like, yeah, it was like my win con or whatever, and like whatever, and then he'll be like, oh, well, I would have countered that, and then he shows you a counter spell expecting you to like have it be countered like 3 turns later, and like, no, you missed your chance.
Well, and that's just
Pay attention.
Yeah, paying attention, and if you're playing at that level, I feel like being cognizant of common combinations, that's a tongue twister, noticing key pieces, because there's not a ton of them.
Yep.
Unless you're playing like a 4 or 5 card combo where you're not expected to know what the 4th card of an infinite turn combo is in a Boros deck or whatever you're playing. Like,
right.
like you're okay. But like if you see a Thassa land and they say, well, I'm going to hold priority, that's your instinct to be like, well, obviously they're going to try and win right now. So let me try and politic with the table, because priority is going to pass around. And instead of trying to priority bully the person on the last person who's not a blue player, you're paying attention, and you're going to be able to politicize, if that's a word. Fact check me if I'm wrong. You're going to be able to talk with the table because you were paying attention and warn them about stuff.
Yeah. And then do we want to go over like our last little topic here? Just kind of like if there's stacks on the other side of the table, like the best ways to deal with it.
Yeah. I know the way I usually get around stacks, because I play in blue quite a bit.
Yeah.
But especially when I'm playing with Urza, if I see a stacks deck, I'll typically try and reach for Urza because I have a lot of bounce effects. And bounce effects are really good at getting rid of stacks pieces just for your turn. So Cyclonic Rift, Capsize is very, very good.
Yep.
Especially if you're just going to float if in a stacks game, you're playing a puzzle, you're going to be holding up mana for multiple turns. So you're going to have 6 mana sitting there ready to capsize something on someone's end step just before your turn and buy it back. So then you have it for the next turn, so you can continue to do more stuff. I've won through multiple stacks games with Urza by capsizing Rule of Law on someone's end step and then capsizing a Deafening Silence on my upkeep. letting the capsize resolve and go to the graveyard, and then going, casting my infinite combo and having 3 counter spells in hand because I was able to bide time because everyone was at parity.
Yeah.
No one was advancing their board because of what Stax pieces were out. But yeah. Me personally, it's bouncing and single target removal, especially in Zur with my removal enchantments that I play.
Yeah. So on the flip side, I don't play a lot of blue. Out of my 7 decks that I have a mono blue and a green blue, and that's it. So I agree with the bounce spell stuff. Like Cyclonic Rift is
very
a
good.
very good one. Especially if you have mana left over or whatever to keep playing on that turn after like a rule of law effect has left the battlefield, so you can like break parity before anyone else does.
Yeah. Well, and that even goes to the effect of casting it on the turn before.
Yep.
Because you are going to be saving up your mana.
Yeah, and another benefit to playing it on the end step prior to your turn is if the person who's before you is playing blue or whatever, and they already cast their 1 spell per turn, they can't counter the Cyclonic Rift because they've cast their 1 spell that turn.
And tying back to paying attention, when you're playing against Stax, be sure to notice what obviously you're going to watch what cards people are playing because you're paying attention now. But knowing how they're sequencing their turn to prepare for their one big turn where they can cast their one like gotcha thing or their one removal thing to take care of it so they can blow up on their next turn.
Right. So if there's a rule of law effect and someone passes with 10 mana open, there's something fishy.
Yeah, 100%. And they're probably saving mana to remove the rule of law and then cast their one big thing. And that's why I like bounce effects, because I can get my value in and get that much further ahead, and then they recast the rule of law.
Yeah.
And
so
then
you
it
get your
locks
one big turn.
everything back down.
Yeah. Another card that I really like for dealing with stacks, I play quite a bit of green in Commander, and most of the stacks pieces you're going to see are enchantments. So cards like Force of Vigor, which is a free spell that lets you destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments, is very good.
Boseiju is
Boseiju is really good because you're not casting a spell, you're activating abilities, so like that gets around quite a bit of stuff. Like even like counter spells. Yeah. They need like a stifle or a disallow.
Disallow, like Tail's End. Dress Down is a really good card. I'm just gonna I'll probably mention that in every episode. Dress Down has hosed me multiple times.
Yep.
Would you say green probably has the most things to deal with enchantment stacks? And artifact stacks? Or red, I think,
red
has
does
more
the artifact stuff. Green is enchantment removal, and then white is kind of like a mix of the two.
So I feel like you're pretty set to handle like your creature threats and your artifact threats.
Yep.
And your enchantment threats.
Yeah, that's being in mono green, like my CDH deck, it's really hard to deal with creatures. I've honestly been thinking about bringing in like fight spells into the deck just because of Shia. The turn I get her out, she's usually at least like a 7/7. So fight spells, especially for 1 mana, that's really efficient removal.
I think in a Shia, if you don't have the infinite mana combo, you at least could generate an infinite bounce combo. Well, I guess that would... If you can infinitely bounce something, you can infinitely generate mana in that deck.
Yeah.
But having a Rex Sage being repeatable. And you get rid of the Null Rod.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you'd have to kill the Null Rod on the ETB. But then removing everything else that is stopping you from floating into an infinite mana sink.
Yep.
Which is really good. I've done that before.
Mm-hmm. Also, another really cool card that came out in the last Innistrad block that I think is a really good card that doesn't see enough play is Outland Liberator.
Mhm.
It is 1 and a green. I believe it's a 2/3. And it lets you pay 1 and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it's a removal spell that stays on board, but it has Daybound. So when it becomes night, it flips into a bigger creature that has the same effect, but it also destroys an artifact or an enchantment defending player controls when it attacks. So it's
super good.
So it can turn into like reoccurring like removal.
Yeah, but I think that pretty much sums it up for our Stax. What is it good for? I just came up with that.
Yeah, right.
It's good for a lot of things, and I think it's good for thought-provoking matches that make you work around multiple pieces and cogs.
Yeah, and like I used to be like the guy that would just kind of groan and like be like, oh, I don't want to play against this or whatever. But now that like I've been like leaning more into the higher end like level of play and running more and more interaction, it is a lot more fun to play against. Just like you said, it's a puzzle.
And I think it's
fun
because
to work through.
We're more. Your deck is more acrobatic and resilient at higher power, depending on how you build it. Sometimes they're glass cannons, and you try and get to your win con as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes your resilience in the higher end allows you to work around Stax pieces a lot better because of how cheap things are. Not money-wise, but casting-wise. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any comments or suggestions for episodes and stuff like that, just drop it in the comments and let us know how we're doing.
Yeah.
Liking the episodes
Yep.
helps with the algorithm.
Liking and subscribing really helps us out a lot, and we really appreciate you guys have been leaving a lot of comments and chatting with us, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, I like taking time out of work to chat with you guys, and I'm being serious about that. It provides a good breakup for the day.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, yeah,
we'll catch y'all in the next one.
See ya.
Peace.